One day, a policeman is strolling down the street when he notices a tiny boy standing in front of a house, desperately trying to reach the doorbell. The boy, however, is too small and the doorbell is just out of his grasp. The policeman watches for a moment, amused, before walking over. Gently placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, he leans forward and rings the doorbell for him with a quick press. Squatting down to the boy's level, the policeman grins and asks, "So what do we do now, little guy?" The boy looks up with a mischievous smile and replies, "Now we run." An 8-year-old girl went up to her dad, who was working in the yard, and asked, "Daddy, what is?" The father, a bit caught off guard, thought for a moment. Realizing that if she was old enough to ask, she was probably old enough to get an honest answer. So he sat her down and carefully explained the birds and the bees. When he finished, the little girl was staring at him, wide-eyed and speechless. After a pause, the father asked, "Why did you ask me this question, honey?" The little girl, still processing, looked up and said, "Well, Mom told me to tell you that dinner will be ready in just a couple of secs." A little girl asked her mother, "Mom, how did the human race come about?" Her mother replied, "God made Adam and Eve. They had children, and so all mankind was created." A few days later, the little girl asked her father the same question. Her dad said, "Many years ago, humans evolved from monkeys." Confused, the girl went back to her mom and said, "Mom, you said we were created by God, but Dad says we came from monkeys. How is that possible?" Her mom smiled and said, "Oh, that's easy, dear. I told you about my side of the family, and your father told you about his." One day, little Johnny was taking a shower with his mother when all of a sudden he noticed the space between his mother's legs. "Mum, what's that black spot between your legs?" he asked her. To which she replied, "Oh, Johnny, that's just my little black sponge." Cool, he thought to himself, and that day at kindergarten, he told all of his friends about it. Of course, they didn't believe him. So he told them to jump on their bikes after school and go to his place and take a look themselves. Well, they all jump on their bikes and eventually arrive at Johnny's place. Little Johnny comes bursting through the front door of his house, with all of his friends following him, yelling out, "Mum, Mum, come here!" She comes out of the kitchen and says to Johnny, "What is it, Johnny? What do you want?" To which he says, "My friends are here to see your little black sponge, Mum. Come on, show it to them." Well, she had to think quick to avoid an embarrassing situation, so she says to Johnny, "I can't show them my little black sponge because I lost it." Well, all of little Johnny's friends are immensely disappointed with him, and all call him a liar as they jump back onto their bikes and ride home. Poor little Johnny is so upset that he runs upstairs to his room, crying his eyes out. Anyway, a couple of minutes later, he comes running back down the stairs, yelling out, "Mum, Mum, I found your little black sponge." His mum comes out of the kitchen and says, "What are you talking about, Johnny? What did you find?" To which little Johnny replied, "I found your little black sponge, Mum. It's upstairs. The maid is washing Daddy's face with it." Once upon a time, Bob was in his hospital bed, receiving medical treatment, not that far after finding out he had cancer. One day, his friend Jeremy decided to visit him. Jeremy told his best buddy this very inspiring sentence. "Sometimes in life, you and your heart will climb tall, peaking mountains and low, flat valleys, and all after that will be happy forever in heaven, eventually." Little did Bob know that Jeremy was talking about his heart monitor. Once upon a time, Bob was in his hospital bed, receiving medical treatment, not that far after finding out he had cancer. One day, his friend Jeremy decided to visit him. Jeremy told his best buddy this very inspiring sentence. "Sometimes in life, You and your heart will climb tall, peaking mountains and low, flat valleys, and all after that will be happy forever in heaven. Eventually. Little did Bob know that Jeremy was talking about his heart monitor. "Johnny, where's your homework?" Miss Martin said sternly to the little boy while holding out her hand. "My dog ate it," was his solemn response. "Johnny, I've been a teacher for 18 years. Do you really expect me to believe that?" "It's true, Miss Martin. I swear it is," insisted Johnny. "I had to smear it with honey, but I finally got him to eat it." A teacher of the earth science class was lecturing on map reading. After explaining about latitude, longitude, degrees, and minutes, the teacher asked, "Suppose I asked you to meet me for lunch at 23 degrees, 4 minutes north latitude and 45 degrees, 15 minutes east longitude." After a confused silence, a voice volunteered, "I guess you'd be eating alone." A senior citizen said to his 80-year-old buddy, "So I hear you're getting married." "Yep. Do I know her?" "Nope." "This woman, is she good looking?" "Not really." "Does she have lots of money?" "Nope. Poor as a church mouse." "Well then, is she good in bed?" "I don't know." "Why in the world do you want to marry her then?" "Because she can still drive." A magician was performing on a cruise ship in the Caribbean, where the audience changed every week. Because of this, he repeated the same tricks over and over again. There was just one problem. The captain's parrot watched the shows every week and quickly figured out how each trick worked. Once he caught on, he started shouting during the performances. "Hey, that's not the same hat. He's hiding the flowers under the table. All the cards are the ace of spades." The magician was infuriated but powerless to stop it. After all, the parrot belonged to the captain. One day, disaster struck when the ship sank. The magician ended up floating on a piece of driftwood in the middle of the ocean, and naturally the parrot was with him. They glared at each other in silence, the tension thick between them, but neither spoke a word. Days passed. After a week, the parrot finally broke the silence, saying, "All right, I give up. What did you do with the ship?" A comedian shows up at his gig at an old age home. The director says, "Listen, we're thrilled that you're here. It's very rare that we get entertainment. You see, everyone here has Alzheimer's." The comedian says, "Well, that doesn't sound too good." "No," says the director. "They'll love you. They will be so happy to get some entertainment. Please, you'll see." So the comedian goes out and tells his first joke. Big laugh. Huge. He thinks, well, that's a good start. So he decides to tell the same joke again. This time, he gets an even bigger laugh. So he tells it again. Gigantic laugh. The audience is falling out of their seats. He tells the same joke a few more times. Each time he gets an even bigger response. The whole time there's a guy in the back watching the show, but not laughing, just sitting there rubbing his chin. Finally, the comedian tells the same joke one last time and says, "Good night, everybody." Thunderous applause. Huge standing ovation. As he's leaving, the comedian walks past the guy in the back. The guy says, "That's quite a show you just did there." The comedian says, "Thank you very much." The guy says, "Let me ask you something. How do you remember all of those jokes?" One day, Billy's teacher asked him, "I heard your mom had a baby. What did she have?" Billy paused and thought for a moment and said, "I think she had a bicycle." Now, Billy, you know that your mom didn't have a bicycle. What did she have? Maybe it was a tricycle. Billy, don't stand there and lie to me. We're going to the principal's office right now. The teacher grabbed Billy and escorted him to the principal's office and explained what happened. The principal looked sternly at Billy and said, "Stop lying, Billy. You know your mom didn't have a bicycle or a tricycle. What did your mother have?" Billy looked up, fear in his eyes, and said, "Well, maybe she had a go-kart." That was more than enough. "I'm calling your mother right now." Soon, Billy's mother arrived at the principal's office. "It seems that Billy has decided to start telling lies. His teacher asked him what you recently had, and he said, a bicycle, then a tricycle, then a go-kart." Billy's mother teared up and, through her sobs, replied to the principal and teacher, "No, sadly, I had a miscarriage." Billy sat up straight and said, "I knew that thing had wheels." A teacher asks her class to use contagious in a sentence. A teacher asks her class to use the word contagious in a sentence. Sally, the class genius, raises her hand and says, "Last year I got the mumps, and my mom said it was contagious." "Very good," says the teacher. "Would anyone else like to try?" Little Johnny raises his hand and stands to give his answer. "Our mean next-door neighbor was painting her house by hand, and my dad said it would take the contagious." The rescue squad rushed to the home of an elderly couple after reports of a possible heart attack. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, it was too late. The man had passed away. As they comforted the grieving widow, one of the rescuers noticed the bed was in complete disarray. Curious, he gently asked what symptoms the man had experienced, and if anything might have triggered the heart attack. The elderly woman sighed and said, "Well, we were in bed making love, and he started moaning, groaning, thrashing around, panting and sweating." She paused for a moment before shaking her head. "I thought he was coming, but I guess he was going." It was pouring rain, and a large puddle had gathered outside an Irish pub. An old man stood by the puddle, holding a stick with a string dangling into the water, gently jiggling it up and down. A passing gentleman, curious and slightly amused, stopped to ask, "What are you doing?" "Fishing," the old man replied with a straight face. The gentleman chuckled to himself, thinking, "Poor old chap, he's lost it." Feeling a pang of pity, he invited the old man inside for a drink. As they sat in the warm pub sipping their whiskey, the gentleman decided to humor him. "So," he asked with a smirk, "how many have you caught today?" The old man took a sip of his drink, smiled slyly, and said, "You're the 8th." 4 women were relaxing in a sauna, each wrapped modestly in a towel. 2 were younger, 1 was middle-aged, and the last was a feisty senior citizen. Suddenly, a soft beeping sound filled the air. One of the younger women tapped her forearm, silencing it. The others looked at her, intrigued. "Oh," she explained, "that's my pager. I had a microchip implanted under my skin." Not long after, a melodic ringtone played. The second young woman casually raised her hand to her ear and started talking. When she finished, she smiled at their curious expressions. "That was my phone," she said. "It's integrated into a microchip in my hand." The middle-aged woman chuckled nervously, glancing at her towel as if it could magically grant her a high-tech upgrade. But before she could speak, the senior citizen got up and left the sauna. Moments later, she returned confidently, with a piece of toilet paper trailing conspicuously from her behind. The other 3 stared in stunned silence, eyebrows raised in confusion. Without missing a beat, the older woman smirked and said, "Well, would you look at that? I'm receiving a fax." A market researcher for the Vaseline company knocked on a door and was greeted by a frazzled young mother with 3 little kids running wild around her. "I'm conducting a survey about Vaseline," he said. "Do you use the product?" "Absolutely," she replied. "My husband and I use it all the time." Curious, the researcher asked, "If you don't mind me asking, what do you use it for?" "We use it when we make love," she answered matter-of-factly. The researcher blinked, surprised. "Wow, most people give me some nonsense about using it on a squeaky door or a rusty bike chain. But let's be honest, I know what it's really used for. I appreciate your honesty. Since you've been so open, can you tell me exactly how you use it? The woman smiled and said, "Oh, that's easy. We put it on the doorknob. Keeps the kids out." A couple in their 40s who loved their children dearly were in their youngest son, who was only 10 years old. As they chatted before bed, they asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. "Son, I want 5 wives." "Mom, 5 wives. And what will each one do?" "Son, well, one will cook, one will sing, one will bathe me." "Mom, and one will put you to sleep?" "Son, no, Mom. I'll still sleep with you." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, God bless you, son." "Mom, but who will take care of your wives then?" "Son, they'll sleep with Daddy." The father's eyes filled with tears. "God bless you, son." The husband's clever solution. The wife is packing her clothes. Husband, "And where do you think you're going?" Wife, "I'm moving to my mother." The husband starts packing too. Wife, "And where do you think you're going?" Husband, "I'm moving to my mother too." Wife, "And what about the kids?" Husband, "Well, if you're going to your mother and I'm going to mine, I guess the kids should go to their mother." After a long and exhausting day, a young woman finally settled into her seat on the train, hoping for a peaceful ride home. She closed her eyes, ready to drift into some much-needed rest. But her hopes were quickly dashed by the man sitting next to her, who whipped out his phone and began speaking loudly enough for the entire train car to hear. "Hi, sweetheart. It's John. I'm on the train," he announced. "Yes, I know it's 6:30, not 4:30, but I had a long meeting." "No, honey, I wasn't with Kathy from accounts. I was with the boss. I swear." "You're the only one in my life." "Yes, I'm sure, dear." For a solid 15 minutes, the conversation dragged on, his voice dominating the space and testing the patience of everyone around him. Finally, the young woman had enough. She leaned in close to him, then spoke loudly into his phone. "John, darling, hang up and come back to bed already." The train car erupted into laughter, and John's face turned bright red. He hung up instantly. And from that day on, John never made another loud phone call in public. Elderly gentleman goes for a checkup. An elderly man visits the doctor for a routine checkup. After the exam, the doctor says, "You're in good health. Is there anything you'd like to ask about?" The man replies, "Actually, yes. After spending time with my wife, I often feel hot and sweaty. But if it happens again later, I feel cold and chilly. What's going on?" Later, the doctor speaks with the man's wife and mentions the concern. "Your husband says he feels hot and sweaty the first time, but cold and chilly the second time. Do you know why?" The wife chuckles and says, "Oh, that's simple. The first time is in summer, and the second is in winter." Old couple's fun memory. One day, Jim asks his wife, "Do you remember our first date behind the old tavern 50 years ago? We had so much fun." She smiles warmly. "Of course, it feels like yesterday." Jim grins, "How about we go back there for old time's sake?" She laughs, "Why not? Let's do it." A young police officer overhears their conversation and decides to follow them out of curiosity. The couple walks slowly to the tavern, leaning on each other for support. Once there, they share a sweet moment reminiscing. The officer watches, touched by their love and energy. As they walk back, the officer stops them. "It's so inspiring to see your bond after all these years. What's your secret to keeping the spark alive?" The old man smiles and says, "It's all about making time for each other and cherishing every moment." One day, a little boy named Sam was playing in the backyard when, during an intense pretend battle, he accidentally knocked over the outhouse. Panicked, he ran into the woods, hiding until after dark. When he finally came home, his pappy was waiting for him with a suspicious look. "Son, did you knock over the outhouse this afternoon?" Sam gulped. "No, pappy." He lied. His father sighed and said, "Let me tell you a story, son. A long time ago, young George Washington got a brand new axe. Excited, he tested it out and accidentally chopped down his mother's favorite cherry tree. Realizing what he had done, he ran off just like you. When he came back, his father asked, "George, did you cut down the cherry tree?" And do you know what he said? "Father, I cannot tell a lie. I did indeed chop down the tree." And because he was honest, his father forgave him and let him go, without punishment. Pappy leaned in and asked again, "Now, son, did you knock down the outhouse?" Sam took a deep breath and said, "Pappy, I cannot tell a lie. I did indeed knock down the outhouse." Then, Pappy tanned his hide red, white, and blue. Through teary eyes, Sam cried, "But Pappy, George Washington's father forgave him. Why did you spank me?" Pappy shook his head and said, "Because, son, George Washington's father wasn't sitting in that cherry tree when he chopped it down." A science teacher in a girls' school asked his class, "Who can tell me what organ in the human body expands up to 10 times its normal size when stimulated?" "Mary, can you answer?" Mary turned bright red and stood up. "Sir, how can you ask such a question? That's inappropriate. I'm telling my parents, and they'll go straight to the principal." The teacher was momentarily taken aback, but quickly realized the misunderstanding. He then turned to another student. Lily eagerly raised her hand. "Yes, Lily?" "Sir, the correct answer is the iris of the eye." "Excellent. Well done, Lily," said the teacher with a smile. He then turned back to Mary and said, "Mary, I have 3 things to tell you. 1, you didn't do your homework. 2, you might need to clean up your thoughts. 3, and lastly, one day you're going to be very, very disappointed."